You are joining us for Leveraging HR Technology to Meet Real-World Challenges. This webinar today is brought to you by LBI Software, and in a moment I will tell you a little bit about them. But first, we have some housekeeping. Number one, this session is being recorded today, but lucky for everyone, all listeners are muted at this point. You may hear references to blogs, articles, people, places, things in this webinar. You can certainly take notes, but don't worry. All links and a copy of the deck and the recording will be sent to you. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about LBI Software before we begin today's webinar. LBI Software is headquartered on Long Island and has been developing customer-focused HR technology solutions for more than 30 years. Their flagship product, LBI HR Help Desk, is a case manager and call tracking workflow solution that creates a rich and powerful knowledge base on the fly. They believe in strong client-vendor partnerships on every project to ensure a highly configurable solution. LBI Software empowers your employees. So please visit lbisoftware.com for more information or visit them on Twitter at LBI Software. And so today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the webinar and to all the people who will be speaking. First of all, my name is Lori Rudiman, and I'm a human resources blogger and speaker, and I write at The Cynical Girl. And I am joined by two great people, Robin Schooling and Richard Teed, and I would like to introduce them right now. Richard, are you there?
Yes.
Great. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
I'm originally from the New York area. I have both my bachelor's and MBA from Hofstra University here on Long Island. I've been managing large enterprise development projects for about 20 years, primarily in the HR space. And when I'm away from work, my two kids, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, keep me pretty busy. I love to ski and mountain bike as much as possible, which lately is really not too often.
Well, good. Well, we're glad that you found some time for us today. Thank you. Now, Robin, how about you? Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I am a certified HR professional, and I've worked in the field for longer than I care to admit, about 25 years, for a variety of industries and a variety of organizations ranging from 100 employees to tens of thousands in global environments. I've been a specialist and I've been a generalist in director and VP roles. And just recently I opened Silver Zebras, which is a consultancy where I help organizations define their HR philosophy and implement their HR strategies. I live in Louisiana. I have an extraordinarily patient husband, crazy cat, 3 dogs, Marley, Libby, and Frank Lapidus. And I cannot wait for football season when the New Orleans Saints will win their second Super Bowl.
There you go. There you go. I'm sure there are a lot of people on today's call that will disagree with you, but that's all right. That's all right. We're in it. Well, I'm really lucky to have both of you today to talk about how we leverage HR technology to meet real-world challenges. And I think we can just kind of jump right in it because despite the power and breadth of technology, some people feel that HR's most important role remains the same. We are here to solve people problems. So, Richard, what do you feel about that? How do you feel about HR and technology coming together to solve people problems?
Well, this is one of the most important points of the entire presentation. Basically, you have a lot of applications out there, a lot of buzzwords, SaaS, the cloud, all these new applications. Everyone, you read the Burson report, 61% of people out there are going to upgrade this year. But when you take away all those buzzwords, how is it really going to help me do my job better? That's what we're going to try and talk about today, and that's what we at LBI are all about.
And Robin, what do you think about that?
Well, it's absolutely true because we in HR are responsible for providing everything foundational that leads to the success of our people and thus the success of our organizations. And so when we peel away the outer skin of any of our responsibilities, we're going to find the human beings at the core. And it's not just the elements that we naturally consider to be people-centric, like recruiting or performance management or employee relations, but even some of the most foundational HR tasks are people-centric, and we need to also look at benefit administration, compensation management, and even compliance and policies and things like that. They're all in place for the people, and we can certainly look at using technology to do these things better and keeping people in the middle of it.
Well, that certainly sounds great, and I think everybody on the call would agree with you. So let's dive right into some of the questions that we have today to discuss. And the first one is, what mindset must HR adopt to truly benefit from technology? And you know, this industry in technology is huge. It's a $14 billion plus industry. So Richard, what are some of the mindsets that HR can adopt?
I think HR should have an open mind. You don't be afraid of change, but on the other hand, don't upgrade or convert just to be trendy. You want to take advantage of a lot of the new features out there like mobile and social interactions. However, you need to make sure at a minimum these new applications can support your business needs at least as good and hopefully better than your current application. Lastly, when you define the project, make sure the scope and budget includes implementing the new features. I've managed several large PeopleSoft conversions back in the day, and when all was said and done, what they got was pretty much what they had, just in a new application. So you want to make sure that you have the new features that are within the scope, because what happens is they get left onto a to-do list, and we all know we never get to that to-do list. Another tip for the listeners is, don't be afraid to get demos. Don't wait until you're ready to buy to get demos of products. You should know when you get ready to buy your product what you want. Don't wait for the procurement process. That should just be a gut check.
I like that tip. That's a really good tip. Robin, what do you think about that?
I totally agree with that, and I think that definitely gets at the process that one goes through, but I like to take it back a step and think of being an HR practitioner who's looking at adopting some form of technology and thinking through what people want, what employees, what managers, what end users want from that experience. And, you know, we as human beings interact with technology in our real lives day to day, and we are so used to having ready access to information, and why should we have to come to work and it's harder for us to access HR information or financial information or whatever it may be? It's harder for us to do that work than it is at home. And so if HR starts to understand what people are looking for, what their employees are looking for in the experience, and how they're going to interact with the technology, that's a critical starting point.
I love it. You're absolutely right. So I think about the next question, and this is something that has been on the minds of a lot of people right now. How can HR use technology to promote more inclusive relationships between companies and their employees? Robin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think it comes back to how as HR professionals we approach it. And we certainly start with an understanding that HR technology can reduce our administrative burdens, because God knows we're all about that. We want to get rid of multiple spreadsheets and pieces of paper, improve compliance, and all of that sort of thing. But if we focus on other things as well, again, I'm coming back to sort of what that experience will be for the end users. The beauty of HR tech adoption in an organization is that it becomes a way of reinforcing to our employees the shift in how people want to work. That we understand that access to information and data internally becomes as democratized in the organization as it is out in the world. We're used to that now. And so letting people have access to things can create a much more inclusive environment. It can be something as simple as a social tech portal that allows employees to interact with each other, post and access information. And that gets at just creating a democratized, involved, inclusive environment.
Perfect, perfect. Richard, what are your thoughts on this? How do HR departments use technology to promote a more inclusive relationship between companies and their employees?
Well, the old adage of a suggestion box comes to mind. So why not have a virtual suggestion box where employees can make suggestions on policies and then provide feedback back to the employee population what those top suggestions have, perhaps having them vote about it in order to prioritize. This really gives the employee the feedback, lets them know it's being taken seriously, and then implement those things. I think it makes them really feel like they're involved.
That's a good tip, absolutely. So that leads us to the next question, and it's a topic that's really hot right now. How can HR use technology to drive employee engagement? So, Richard, I know you have a great story to tell, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this?
Well, as a business owner, I can honestly tell you that employees are my most important asset by a mile. And it's all about making things easier for the employee. Everyone would agree that a fully engaged employee is a huge benefit to any organization. So one proven strategy, like Robin was speaking, was give them applications, make their job feel more consumer-oriented so that things can become easier. And I'll give you an example. Here, we have a big deal. Every Friday, we do Pizza Fridays. And back 15 years ago or so, it used to be a laborious task. Everyone was handed a sheet, and you had to choose which slices you want, different pies. It's not just 10 pies. This is pretty serious here. You know, someone might want a slice of white, a slice of spinach, etc. So we created a whole website that allows them to pick and choose what they want, and each week we cycle through a new pizzeria. We may add pizzerias, and that becomes a whole task in itself with lobbying and everything.
Well, I love it. And do you find that going online and using technology has really made this kind of a fun experience? Because, you know, coordinating all of this could really be a huge cluster. But here is a really, what I think, a great example of making this fun and streamlined and not burdensome.
Yes, I agree. I mean, you need to make it fun. You need to make it easy to use. I mean, just think about how easy it is for you to order groceries or a refrigerator or any appliance, have it delivered the next day. Yet if an employee has a question as to why their copay suddenly just went up for a doctor's visit, they have to wait days sometimes for an answer. It's just not a productive use of a valuable asset's time. You know, this is the premise that LBI created HR Help Desk product for, empowering the employee to get the answers to their questions right away, right at their fingertips.
Perfect. Perfect. Robin, what do you think about this? How can HR use technology to drive employee engagement?
You know, I think Richard gave some fabulous examples of that, and what I heard coming through that is retaining the balance between technology with person-to-person contact. You know, we're never going to let technology totally manage the relationship with our employees, and we want to keep things personal and keep a personal link while providing access to people to the information that they want and that they need and desire. And, you know, we can use that then to migrate ourselves away from thinking in HR measuring activities that we perform is what leads to engagement. You know, so we don't need to report on, you know, the number of people we trained or the number of, you know, employee lunches that we held or something like that and hold that up as engagement. We can use technology tools to really measure that engagement once we define what engagement means in our organization, because we're going to have access to data. We're going to see the activities that are meaningful to people and have a much better sense of what that's doing within the organization, what the results are, and ultimately the impact on the business goals.
Well, I love it because I think about how narrative is really what makes the data interesting to people. So that's what I hear both you and Rich saying. It's really about using the data to tell a story and tell a more compelling story and to be persuasive when you need to be or to make a point when you need to be as well. So those are really great examples. You know, another hot topic in the world of human resources, and I mean, Robin, this is no surprise to you, is privacy, right? So I think about there are a lot of ways that HR can use technology to invade privacy, but I don't know, Richard, maybe we can start with you. How can HR use technology to ease privacy concerns for employees as well as the company?
Well, I think it's not a matter of how. You want to make sure HR technology is protecting that privacy. You want to make sure that the vendor has formal policies in place. for HIPAA, PHI, PII. Recently SaaS and the cloud has made software that was previously too expensive available to mid-size and small businesses. But you need to understand and ask the right questions. Is the application multi-tenant? Is where the vendor's application has multiple clients on the same application? How is my data protected from another company's data? One way is by data isolation, where you have separate databases, instances, and schemas, which would be very good. Also, you could have a private cloud versus a public cloud. Now, the public cloud is the EC2, which is Amazon. Private cloud would be where the provider is keeping all their clients within that cloud, and no one else can get in there. No one public. There's no other access within that cloud. So you need to ask those right questions. Make sure that your data is safe, because ultimately that is very important to both the employee as well as the company.
Richard, I wanted to just quickly follow up on that before we get Robin's thoughts, because I think about being an HR generalist myself back in the day, right? A 27-year-old woman who had a very limited knowledge of technology, and I really relied upon my vendors to be partners with me and help educate me through the process of asking the right questions. So they were really not just vendors, they were co-collaborators, co-conspirators, if you will. So is that the approach that you tend to take with your clients? Because there's a lot of education, I would imagine, that happens within the HR world, and you have to deliver it.
Exactly, and we do. And basically, however the client needs their data protected, we will recommend. So sometimes the cloud isn't the answer to everyone. Sometimes keeping it on a private server. Sometimes hosting it themselves is the answer if they feel more comfortable with that option. And it has to do with each firm. And so we find that we will recommend different things based on their requirements and give them all the options, explaining those options in detail.
Yeah, that makes sense. Robin, aren't you amazed at how HR technology has changed over the past 25 years? I've only been doing this 20, so and a little less than 20, but man, it's changed since I walked in the door. So how do you ease those privacy concerns for both employees and the company?
It's astounding to me sometimes to think and look back, and we've always had the responsibility to protect employee data. And I think back to organizations where we had giant rooms with literally, rows and rows of file cabinets with 5,000 employee personnel files in them, triple locked, and, you signed your life away to get the key to go in there, that sort of thing. So we've always had that. And, I think we've just migrated it to a different way. And I find that most of my peers, most of my HR colleagues still take that responsibility very seriously. And to Richard's point of collaborating with either the vendor themselves or the solution provider, we can look internally as well. And I've had some misses in the past, but I've also had great success implementing new solutions by working with my internal IT department, and I think it's key to bring them on board, whether it's going to be no matter if it's going to be in the cloud or if it's going to be hosted or whatever it may be. Their input in the process has been helpful to me to also help me ask the right questions.
Yeah, I think the questions are the key. I remember walking in and HR was in charge of the fax machine. That's the kind of technological advancements that we had. And I was so excited when we can move the files, those old paper files, to Iron Mountain, right? I was just thrilled. That was the old days of doing it. And now I think asking the right questions and making sure that you're smart about technology is the right way to go. And technology is changing so quickly right now. So I'm wondering, you've got technology, you've got employee litigation going on right now. Things can get very costly very quickly. So how can HR use technology to identify and mitigate employee concerns before they escalate? Robin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, forewarned is forearmed. Is forearmed a word? I don't know, but that's kind of what I always think. And, back in the day, the early tech days in HR, I kept notebooks, and then I had spreadsheets, and I had access databases, and I tried to gather data together, exit interviews, which sadly are after the fact of an issue perhaps. But, certainly capturing and tracking the data. And, if we don't have an eye into what's happening, especially in geographically dispersed larger organizations, it can really cause a mess. I worked for an organization once, multi-state, and had some responsibilities for groups in other states. And one day I got a call from a very distraught and upset manager who had 5 employees walk off the job together, kind of some key positions. And I come to find out that this was due to an employee relations issue that, had it been tracked, escalated, managed, had the right people been alerted to it, we could have mitigated the problems that it caused. And there just were not processes or solutions in place to get that information to me sitting in recruiting, and I ended up having to scramble very reactively to fill 5 positions that I could have had a handle on beforehand.
Yeah, that story is going to be very familiar to so many people on this call, Robin. Richard, I wonder what you think about employee litigation, the expense, how costly it is, and how HR can use technology to really mitigate some of these concerns before things just get out of control.
Well, LBI HR Help Desk was intended exactly to solve the problem that Robin just described. Basically, providing that whole workflow so that problems are handled by the right people, things are escalated properly. But even more to that, you can take the data from this product and integrate it with the other data you have in HR, and identify what employees are having repeated issues, what managers have employees with the most complaints, what types of issues are recurring more frequently, in what geographic area in the organization or logical area in the organization are you having more problems, what employee grades. You can dice that data so you can get in front of the problems before they escalate, so you can identify and perhaps come up with solutions, change policies. Sometimes it's as simple as identifying that a medical provider has a lot of issues, and it's perhaps even updating your knowledge base or your benefits guide to make it more informative, and that can get in front of problems before they escalate.
That's perfect. That's really great. And it leads us, I think, into our next really interesting area of discussion. And I know, Robin and Richard, you have an opinion on this. HR uses technology in all sorts of ways. And right now, there's all this discussion around tracking employee communication, either between employees or about the employer brand. So, Robin, how do you think HR can use technology productively and thoughtfully to really get on board and understand what's going on with the company brand?
Well, again, I think it takes some education of our HR brethren to understand what the purpose is to seek out online information, because I think what happens now is HR professionals, HR practitioners will often seek out, go searching for specific online comments or the presence of an identified employee after the fact, or after something is brought to their attention, or while they're in the midst of perhaps investigating some other issue. And, could someone sit and, do a whole lot of manual searches? I'm sure there are organizations where Sally, the HR assistant, is tasked with sitting down, for several hours a day and trying to find things that people put online. The key is that, there are HR technology applications that can embed the capability within a platform, and it certainly gives HR leaders the opportunity to do things consistently, to do things in a meaningful way. And it's the same as a company searching for their brand appearing on Google Alerts or something of that nature. And so it's certainly an area where HR needs to be educated on how to do that and why to do it.
It is interesting because I think sometimes either HR is paying attention or they're completely not paying attention, right? There's no in-between. They're either hyper-focused on it or not focused on it enough. And Richard, I wonder what your thoughts are on how HR can use technology to track the employer brand and to track what's going on social networking.
Well, like Robin just discussed, there are a lot of applications such as ours that give HR the ability to monitor employees' public information on these social media sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google+, Twitter, etc. So the question really isn't not how, but it's should you and can you. You know, a recent article in the New York Times examined those legal issues, and they found that courts are frowning on widespread policies that ban the use of social media or ban disrespectful comments about the company. But what they have been permissible about is allowing employers to act against a lone worker ranting on the internet. But I don't think that's really the issue. It's not about trying to, I mean, you can look at it as it's another way of monitoring what's being said about the company in public forums. So a benefit to that is you're able to monitor employee discussions about the company and uncover employee discontent or problems that you would not have known about if you didn't do that. So it's not about trying to find someone who's, you know, tarnishing your brand. It could be another avenue for determining issues and getting in front of those problems like we discussed in the previous slide.
Well, I think that's so spot on. And I know, Robin, one of the things that you preach, and this is something that you talk about within your own consulting services, is really being that kind of proactively engaged HR professional who is assuming good intent, right, and always trying to get ahead of the problem. So I would imagine that you see a role for social media monitoring being an optimistic thing, right? Do you have any examples about that or any thoughts on that?
You know, I think that's absolutely right, and you know, where I've found it used successfully personally, and where I've seen other organizations use it successfully, is being aware of the positive things that employees are doing online, whether they're engaging with the company or not, but what are they doing online, and being open to promoting that and tapping into that and connecting with employees positively out in the webosphere and tapping into the good things rather than the bad things. You know, using that for an onboarding experience, using that as part of sort of a continual engagement mechanism for people once they're in your organization. The power is tremendous, absolutely tremendous.
Richard, it sounds like you had something to add.
Well, I couldn't agree more. You know, in our society, we tend to focus on the negatives, and really, there, like Robin said, there are a lot of positives to be gained. You know, you don't have to focus on someone making a negative comment. A positive comment could you know, return results tenfold.
Well, and I also think about Pizza Friday and the potential for employers who are doing really good things out there to then kind of tap in and see the return and the resonance of some of the activities they're doing. So for me, Pizza Friday, Richard, is a really great example of, you know, what are your employees saying about you out there? What's positive? And what are people who are researching your company really finding out about you out on the Internet? So hopefully, if they're looking for LBI software, they're going to hear more about Pizza Friday, especially after this webinar. That's my goal.
That would be great.
I like pizza.
Yeah, who doesn't? Oh, my goodness. Well, let's talk about something that's so trendy. And, you know, Richard, you can get us started on this discussion around big data, because this is what you hear when you attend as an HR professional conferences, when you pay attention to SHRM and you read any magazines. You just hear about big data, right? And I think big data is a big subject, and I think you probably have some really nuanced things to say about it. So how do we use technology to start embracing it, Richard?
Well, HR creates mountains of data on its employees from the moment they're hired to when they leave the organization. And we can build warehouses or data marts tying this data in with other corporate financial data and organizational data. For example, a balanced scorecard initiative that correlates HR metrics to the overall corporate performance. We have all these HR data also on our past hires, from applicant tracking, performance reviews, and talent management. can use that data to determine what makes a good hire so that going forward, we can better make decisions on the applicants.
I think that sounds about right. What I'm interested also in is all of the data that's being out there that isn't being used and where that sits and how that can be tapped into in the future, because I think every action that happens in human resources, you know, some of it's valuable and some of it isn't, but we like to save all of that history. So do you have any thoughts about all of that data that's being created that we don't use now but we might use in the future?
Yes. I mean, data is, you know, like you're saying, very important. You want to make sure you keep it. The old adage used to be, I remember we have archiving projects, archive the data we're not using, and exactly. But right now, that's when you know, DASD or a hard disk were a premium. Now it's very cheap to save all that data. You don't want to lose it. You can build it into a business intelligence models. You can use business objects, a lot of different tools out there, and you can bring this type of reporting right to the end user.
Fabulous, fabulous. Robin, what are your thoughts about this whole monster of big data, right? Because it can be pretty scary if you're an HR generalist in, you know, anywhere from New York City to Paducah, Kentucky. This is something they're all dealing with.
Absolutely, and you know, I do, you know, I hate to keep talking about how old I am and how long I've been around working with this stuff, but you know, it used to be data was what we stored on honest-to-God recipe cards when we purged our terminated employee files once upon a time, and you know, so we really couldn't even pull that information in to anything. And so it's amazing now to look at how we can store data, report on it, and really, you know, start as a profession in understanding that data leads us right to information, which leads us to knowledge for the past state, which is what we've always done, but the current state, but more importantly, the predictive state, the future state. What can we use that for? And you know, it's a challenge, I think, for HR. And Matt Stolick wrote a blog post this morning, actually previewing this webinar, which was very nice of him. But he talked about while the fact is that SHRM and other organizations talk about HR technology being a critical competency for HR professionals, they're really still focusing on some of the basic things: data integrity, data sharing, social engineering, monitoring software, things like that. And so we need to collectively develop an understanding of predictive use of data. And I think that's fascinating that we're looking at.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, I really, one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and this is maybe something that you're interested in or something that you're not interested in, but a lot of people feel that they must save everything. And Richard, you touched on this just really briefly, that data in storage is now so cheap. We used to put everything on tapes back in the day when I was in HR. So is it, and do you have any thoughts on this about saving everything versus going in and doing that old purge?
You absolutely want to save everything, because even if you don't think you're going to use it, you know, we're using things today that I think no one dreamed we would be able to do. I mean, think about what you can do on your iPhone now compared to what you could do on your desktop 10 years ago. So, you know, retain as much data as possible. I mean, it's the simple answer.
I love it. I think that's right. And I think you're right about the power of the phones. I used to always delete pictures that I would take on my phone because it would take up too much memory. And now I save every picture, including the ugly ones, right? Because why not? It's cheap to store all of that. So I would also like to talk a little bit about job improvement and job alignment, because, you know, technology is big and mysterious with data, but it also fits nicely into the day in, day out interactions of an HR generalist. So how can HR use technology to improve job alignment and aid performance management? And I know, Robin, you're the queen of performance management, right? You know exactly what this is all about. So why don't you tell us your thoughts on this one?
Well, you know, one of the interesting pieces of information that always comes to mind for me is based on a study I saw last year that McKinsey did, and they were talking about using social technologies of any sort within organizations and how that would aid in performance. And so what they found through the course of this survey was that knowledge workers spend an average of, I believe they said 28 hours per week searching out information, collaborating internally, writing emails, sort of those administrative tasks. And that once an organization tapped into technology in any sort of way, social networking channels, internal social tech, that they found that there was an improvement of 20 to 25% in productivity for people. So it certainly comes to the forefront that allowing people access and allowing them and encouraging them to interact with data in any way is important. And you just think of, again, back to what Rich had mentioned before, that HR person that's sitting there looking up information and answering phone calls and whatnot, or the employee who's spending their time seeking that information. If we can find a way to put that at their fingertips, let them collaborate with each other and access information, they'll just improve their productivity, increase their performance in other areas of their job because they're not getting frustrated.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. I think about that collaboration piece, and I was lucky enough to be at Pfizer back in the day when they were working on their internal wiki. And this was something that was new and avant-garde, right? God forbid we all share information. And some really great scientist created one of the first internal company wikis ever in the history of humankind. And so that was pretty cool, right? So I think there is something to be said for collaboration. And I know, Richard, you're passionate about this. So what are your thoughts about technology to help improve job alignment and aid performance management?
Well, I think it relates back to the big data question. We do analysis on all this historical data to better match up the qualifications with positions. So the organizational goal should be to merge HR data via ETL processes and these other technical terms with other organizational data. So merging employee performance reviews, case issues, and other actionable data, for example, sales if they're a salesman, and then follow the trends by the person over time by area, location, and positions over time. We can also tie in the case management data to identify the satisfaction trends within certain positions.
Yeah, that is the absolute dream that is becoming a reality now, right? And I think you bring up an interesting thing about job alignment and performance management. It really challenges the HR professional to get his or her act together and become someone who can understand and interpret data in a new way. So do you have any thoughts on that, Richard?
Yes. The organization, you're going to have this data. You're going to want to have a view into it. Now, you need to tie it in. I do have an interesting story. I don't know if this exactly relates to that. It's on sales and how a company determined how to best hire their salespeople. And they thought it was by hiring according to their resume and what school they went, their GPA. And what they found was when they went back and looked at this historical information, that was not the case. They actually, little things by looking at historical data, like how long it took them to finish their degree, were more important. How grammatically correct their resume was. And then they took that information and changed policies, went forward, and they were able to notice a large improvement in revenue.
I love it. That's really interesting. We'll have to make sure to get that link out to everybody who's listening so they can learn a little bit more about that. So, Robin, from my perspective, is there anything else that you would like to add about HR using technology to improve job alignment and aid performance management? Because I really think this challenges that HR skill set to just ramp up a little bit more.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and it really it builds on what Rich was just talking about, and it also becomes a matter of HR deciding what to measure. So it kind of wraps it back to what's the data we should keep and look at, and what should we measure? What are the metrics that are important, if you will? And we often rely on some of those old chestnuts that we think makes us look all smart, and we're really just tracking things in the recruiting space. For example, what's our time to fill? What's our turnover? What's some basic numbers. But if we can tap into technology and the data that we have, and go back to that job alignment, are we hiring the right person? There can be some powerful stuff there. If we can determine for our organization what's quality of hire, how does that tie back to the recruiting plan, the numbers that we create, the number of people we hire, in what positions, tying that into their performance. Are they aligned? Are they in the right position? And we come up with a whole new way to look at our recruitment function, rather than just, perhaps we took time to hire from 42 days to 39 days or something that's really meaningful to the organization, and then we can turn that around and tie a dollar value to that, and that's going to speak to the people sitting in the C-suite that could care less about what they see as soft and fuzzy HR things. We want to use that data to speak their language around some of these people issues.
Well, Robin, I couldn't agree with you more, and especially around some of the issues that are classic to HR, for example, diversity and inclusion. Many of us have been given a mandatory mandate, basically, to focus on diversity and inclusion in our organizations, and for some companies that's a little bit easier than others. So maybe we can start with Richard on this one. Richard, do you have any thoughts on how HR can use technology to understand concerns around gender and diversity and some of the issues that go along with that?
Yes, I do. And I think it really comes back to HR analytics and data mining, and finding the HR data available to identify the percent of genders in positions, their average salaries. You can take metrics, can be done against performance reviews and compared to promotions, raises, bonuses along those grades and positions to ensure fairness. I mean, we look in 2010, women now represented more than half our population and more than half the managerial professional workforce. Yet, why are they not? They're only 14% of the board seats. So there is definitely a problem there. And if you can identify the problem with the data within your organization, you can only control what's within your organization, but if you can identify that your organization is having that problem, you can self-correct.
Or you can make an active choice not to correct, which is what happens in some organizations. Or they say, this is exactly how we're going to run our business, and they make some business decisions based around that gender and diversity data. I think that happens often as well. So, Robin, what do you think about that? What do you think about how HR can use technology in this space?
That certainly is a key component of it, the things that Richard just spoke to. I think there are other ways that we can take a look at, again, sort of what are some concerns that may be out there that are not necessarily going to bubble up through some traditional means. And so when we look at HR technologies used internally, HR social networks, things of that nature, we can find ways to track what's the information that people are accessing. Are there, if we can store information online, policies around our harassment, perhaps our harassment policies, there are ways that we can get a sense of how many people are accessing that information. Are they downloading that? Are they interacting with certain policies or exploring questions related to the workplace and to the culture? And it may give us an insight into any sort of inclusionary effort. Are there more women that are accessing some of this information? Is there a work group or a department or folks who work for a particular manager that seem to have questions around some of these key areas? So it's sort of taking that soft HR feel that we used to get from, kind of walking around or talking to people at town hall meetings and that sort of thing, and we can really put some hard data behind it if we've got the tools.
Yeah, I like that. And Richard, that reminds me of your point earlier about taking a lot of this human resources data and then funneling it into organizational data and financial analytics that are out there and really telling a more complete story of the organization. So I would imagine you feel that can be accomplished if we start collecting the right data around gender and diversity.
Absolutely. And going back to what you said, I mean, companies have to have an open mind about this. And reviewing things by groups, having groups then review the data and results can also help, that has nothing to do with technology, but that can help with combating stereotyping and, classic problems some organizations may be having.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, to another point where a lot of skeptics weigh in and talk about technology and HR, some people don't really believe that HR can use technology to improve sales and boost the bottom line. So, Richard, I know you've got some really strong opinions on this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I hear this, and I hear this a lot about, HR can't impact the bottom line. HR can't impact that. Well, your employees impact it, and if it's HR's responsibility to hire, make sure you're hiring good employees, make sure they're engaged. So yes, they impact everything. HR can have an impact on everything within the organization. In particular, you can, use the things we've been talking about, data mining, big data, to go back and identify what makes a good hire, what makes a good salesperson. So of course, if you could determine what makes a good salesperson and then move forward, right there you're improving the bottom line.
I love it. I think that's right. Robin, what do you think about this? Because I know you've been a working actual HR practitioner for only really a few years, not as many as you say. And I think there are a lot of skeptics out there, right, who don't believe that sales and technology even have anything to do with human resources. So how do you think HR can use technology in this space?
Yeah, and it really is a matter of echoing what Rich said as well. It also becomes imperative for HR professionals to come in and demonstrate that they believe there's a connection, because this is the perfect opportunity for us to go in and demonstrate that we understand the business, and we can converse around concepts such as tying economic data back into what we're seeing as trends within our organization, people trends, performance trends, things of that nature, and linking down to the individual level or the department level, whatever it may be, the analytical data, the information gathered on our customers, who are the customers of the organization. And, we definitely need to be sitting in there as part of those discussions and providing, the information and providing the understanding to our sales leaders, for example, that there is a connection. We can drive that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That feels right to me. And, I think as we continue the conversation around HR technology, there are really cool ways to use it as well. So I want to know, Richard, what do you think about how HR can use technology to get better insight into onboarding problems and turnover trends? Because this is something that affects you, whether you're a VP of Human Resources or you're an HR assistant. You hear about these things. So how can technology make this better?
I mean, it could even affect me as a small business owner.
Right.
If you go back to the research, Sheeran research shows that organizations that have formal onboarding processes or programs are more effective than ones that don't. And technology can help you build those formal onboarding programs and implement step-by-step programs for new employees, teach them what their roles are, what the norms of the company are, and how they're to behave. HR help desk handles the full extent of employee relationship with the employer. Once hired, it tracks concerns, issues, questions the employee may have throughout their tenure. By tying this data back in HR analytics, as we've been previously discussing, you can identify patterns of issues that can lead to higher turnover when not addressed.
Yeah, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. And I know, Robin, you probably have some thoughts about this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest issue that we've always had when we track turnover, which we love to do, is we're looking at that data after, and often long after the fact. And, our onboarding program's the same way. Onboarding becomes, sadly, just a once-and-done endeavor. And when we use technology internally, we can be more immediately responsive to the underlying issues in both of those. If we conduct orientation or onboarding new employees, it may normally be months or let alone years before we check back with an employee to see if they understood things. And it's easy to forget that we know the material, and an employee doesn't have that level of understanding. So, we can certainly get a better understanding of what people are retaining when they're starting with the organization. And certainly, again, as we've already talked about with turnover, knowing ahead of time what some impending issues are looming can help us predict turnover or ideally eliminate it when it's turnover we don't want to happen.
Yeah, your story about losing those 5 employees at the last minute really demonstrates that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm really curious because this is an interesting statistic. 86% of organizations have recognition programs in America. And that makes me laugh because I'm not sure 86% of employees actually realize that, So I wonder, how can HR use technology to help improve the benefits of rewards programs? So Richard, what do you think about that?
Well, we do it by finding out what the employees actually care about. I mean, there are a ton of rewards programs out there that employees know about, and they're simply just not interested in it. Whether it be age, gender, or quirky interests, it's hard to get rewards and benefits to appeal to everyone. Yet we can figure it out so easily. Just ask them. Use surveys are a great tool when it comes to employee engagement, rewards, benefit, or anything else. It allows you to get back feedback directly from your audience. It's one of the key features that we have in HR Help Desk is in the self-service portal is a feedback option at the end, where an employee can simply make a suggestion to improve the knowledge base. That's a survey in action. In addition to directly asking the employee, we should then use what we've been talking about all along, analytics, to see what reward programs are working best, expand on those, and drop the ones that are just not working.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. I don't know, Robin, what do you think about how HR technology can help improve the benefits of rewards programs? Because, Rich made a lot of really great points, and I think about your experience in the trenches of human resources, and you probably have some really interesting insights as well.
I think we can, again, dial it back to really what we started talking about, and that is that it remains people-centric, and it's, the core of what we do is our people understanding what our programs are, what we're doing, and what things mean. And we can use the power of technology internally to make sure that people are understanding any reward program. Are they being rewarded for the right behavior? If it's behavior we're looking at, are they being rewarded for the right results? And then using that to share that information across the organization, which just reinforces the understanding for everybody. I worked at an organization once where we had a annual sales banquet type of thing, and the first time that it was launched, there was absolutely no thought given to it other than, we want to have a sales banquet because everybody else has a sales banquet. And so the first go-round, which was before I got there, had been this exercise in futility where there was no criteria, there was no understanding of why people were receiving any rewards or any recognition that they were receiving, because nothing had been laid out. And so behaviors weren't identified, results weren't necessarily clarified, and it was sort of just plucked out of the air. So there's a fail right there. And we certainly have the capabilities to do things like that a whole lot better, whether that be through the use of technology and then the layer on top of that of communicating, reinforcing, and sharing that information across the organization.
Well, I think those are really great examples, and I think, Richard, some of what you said really resonated with me, that, technology has a real important place to play in a lot of this, but also it's about leadership, and you as a small business owner can probably speak to this, that if you have a benefits program, technology can't necessarily solve all the problems of educating your employees on that rewards and recognition program.
No, it can't. I mean, you have to have the leadership in the organization has to, make the right decisions. Technology can only help you. They can't make you make the right decisions. It's a useful tool. like Robin was saying, can get the message out. Technology can help you get the message out. It can help you get that survey out. But you have to have the foresight to want to ask those questions, to want that information from the employee. If you don't have it, technology can't solve that.
Well, I think that's really insightful. And as we start to wrap up the webinar, I wanted to first of all thank you both, Richard and Robin, for joining us. And Richard, can you tell us where people can find you on social networking sites and technology sites? How can they find you?
At LBI Software on Twitter and lbisoftware.com on the web.
Perfect.
We're on Facebook and all the others also, but you'll find us through that.
Good. And Robin, where can people find you online?
Well, I'm everywhere online, so often I people to Google me, but at Robin Schooling on Twitter is often the best way to get a hold of me. HR Schoolhouse is my blog, and SoberZebras.com.
Great, perfect. Well, I'd like to thank both Richard and Robin for joining us today and having a really thoughtful and fun and kind of interesting discussion about HR and technology. So thank you both. And to everyone listening, the recording will be available in the next few days. We'll be sending it out via email, as well as links to the articles and blogs and bloggers and all the interesting stuff that we talked about. So that'll all be embedded in the email message that you receive. And I want to remind you that you can feel free to share the webinar, the recording, and all the materials that we're sending to you with your friends and with your colleagues. And if you're on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, please feel free to share that information there as well. So once again, thank you from LBI Software. We really appreciated your participation on today's webinar. And if you want more information about LBI, you can visit lbisoftware.com. Thank you all and have a great day.